It's always fascinating to watch the cutscenes from Sonic games in Japanese. That's because Sonic stories seem to evolve and morph a lot during production, so there's often a conceptual version of the story at an early stage, where Sonic Team has amazing ideas, great characters and tons of ambition, and then eventually the final product stage, where after endless infighting in Saga, a desperate trying to guarantee a functioning product, and tons of terrible decisions has slimmed down their original version into a graveyard of good ideas with all of its graves cobbled together into one giant pile of tragedy. For gameplay, story, and everything. But as far as story is concerned, when you're paying close attention to cutscenes, especially in the Japanese version, although sometimes the English version as well, you might catch one or two leftover bits from an older and alternative version of the story. I talked about Infinite having apparently two entirely different backstories fragmented into the pile of rubble that's Sonic Force's plot, and I recently have been checking the Japanese side of Sonic Lost World and noticed a few interesting details. A Japanese trailer refers to the Lost Hex as a future continent, and in the Japanese cutscenes, Tails refers to Lost Hex as the continent of illusions. And that clicked because Lost Hex is meant to be this exciting lost continent filled with secrets. The teaser is about the discovery of a mysterious land in the clouds. I mean, the title of the game, Sonic Lost World, you'd expect the game to put some interest in building the Lost World up as some sort of interesting new lost hidden continent. Have some adventure and mystery about it. Some Indiana Jones or Laputa Flying Castle kind of stuff. Yet the game itself never particularly cares about anything and bothers to give its setting any mystery or anything more substantial than giving it a weird art style. An art style that's then used for non-Lost Hex environments as well, even inside Lost World's own game, so even that original bit of identity goes out of the window immediately. And yet, apparently, early in development, Sonic Team did put some thought into Lost Hex identity. Besides its fun little theme of hexagons, the closest it currently still has of a kind of theme in the finished game, apparently it used to be a continent of the future, of illusions! Ooh, interesting concepts that are nowhere to be found in the finished product.
Wait a minute. Continent of the future, continent of illusions, and it has this hexagon theme going on. That's why it's called Lost Hex. That reminds me of Metropolis from Sonic Forces. That level is futuristic. It has illusions from Infinite. It even has a ton of hexagons.
How much do you want to bet that Metropolis City was originally designed to be for Sonic Lost World but didn't make it in and was recycled for Sonic Forces? Probably because it looked too good to fit with Lost World's interesting graphic style.
Would explain why they gave Dr. Eggman such a lovely looking city. Bright, hopeful. You'd think Eggman's dark capital of evil would be more polluted and have his creepy face everywhere.
Can you imagine the Zeddy living in a city like this, maybe even ruling it? Zavok being a city mayor? That gives them a whole different feel.
Zavok is such a waste of a character anyway. So, he's a master manipulator, right? We see him manipulate his henchmen to fight Sonic, but isn't that a waste of his skills? Wouldn't it have been more interesting to see him screw with Sonic and Tails' minds? In fact, Lost World's entire story is about Sonic and Tails having trust issues. In the finished game, it comes out of nowhere. Makes you wonder if there's an earlier version of the script where it was Zavok manipulating the gang.
Not to mention there's a wonderful irony about it, right? Zavok spends the entire game manipulating his teammates to do his bidding, and then he ends up being trapped in Eggman's control through the conch. The master manipulator himself trapped to do someone else's bidding.
I can already imagine Tails making his stupid "now that's irony, folks" joke right there.
But I bet this goes over the heads of most people because Zavok's personality doesn't really get demonstrated until after the conch is no longer relevant. Not to mention, watching him manipulate the Zeddy isn't very satisfying to watch either, because we don't really know what the Zeddy's own feelings about the whole situation is, so... Besides that, it always makes them very uncomfortable as villains, at least to me. Zord, Xena, and Zamam go from being enslaved to manipulated, and then having to deal with Sonic who immediately picks a fight with them.
Sonic Forces would have been so much more interesting with the real Zavok in Eggman's army. Sonic Forces ends with Sonic having this stupid speech about the importance of friendship, right? A speech that makes no sense since the game never bothered to demonstrate what Eggman's relationship with his henchmen were.
Well, we see him complaining at Infinite once, but it's true, I don't know if they were constantly bickering or if that's just a one-time event, because Infinite really did screw up by letting Sonic go.
Sure, but if Zavok was there, under control by the conch, and constantly bickering and bitterly trying to backstab Eggman, then Sonic's speech about friendship would have had more of a punch to it.
That reminds me, I realized lately that I find Zavok a fascinating character. I mean, not in-universe, he's boring as hell, but that's mostly because Sega's incompetent writers don't fucking do anything with him, or any other character or interesting concept they have. But from a meta perspective, let's say a character in a video game has two layers. One, its purpose in the game, it being a cog in the machine, a pawn in the game, hero, motivator, tutorial, bad guy, boss character. And then there's the character layer that makes it more than just a soulless part of the machinery, but turns him into something alive. Its personality, its history, its motivation, whatever. Now, what's recently been bothering me about modern Sonic game stories is that the characters no longer feel alive, but starting to become more and more just soulless puppets to me, parts of the machine. And that's assuming they even have a part in the machine, like a villain or a good guy or whatever. It's even worse when they're completely stuck in some sort of limbo state where they only show up for a vague, meaningless meta, I guess their main character's cameo. Poor Amy and Knuckles. And even that by itself doesn't have to be bad. A fun little cameo for world building purposes is great. But add on top of that the characters all feel off, with their personalities constantly switching, their story history missing, and it starts to feel uncanny. So, most Sonic characters are becoming more and more Nintendo-fied, as I like to call it. As in, any context, history, or any kind of weight they have just gets in the way of them being flexible game components, so they become stripped until they're just mildly flavored game pawns. Shadow's a perfect example of watching this in action. Shadow as a game component is the rival, a boss character, an enemy. He's a darker version of Sonic with the same skills, so it makes perfect sense to face off against him in the game. But as a character, you can't just use Shadow as a default random enemy. Shadow has a personality, a goal, a position in the world. So you need the story to create a situation why Sonic and Shadow would be facing.
Shouldn't be too hard to get those two to fight each other. Friendly competition or gun sending Shadow on a mission that conflicts with Sonic.
Sure, but this is modern Sonic writing, so most of the time Shadow's just bad guy man who fights Sonic because we need boss fight. If you're lucky, they throw in some half-assed excuse about him being an illusion or he's hypnotized or whatever. But they won't bother respecting Shadow as a character and developing a natural way why they fight, like the previous games, well, at least attempted. Now everyone is just a soulless pawn in the game with a mild personality flavor to them that most writers get wrong as well. So Shadow is boss character man, so Sonic and Shadow fight because friends suck and he's hypnotized and blah 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 whatever. But at least with most characters, their position as a game pawn doesn't conflict too much with their story position. Most characters fit comfortably in Sonic's best friend or evil bad guy category, so even if all the details are a little bit wrong, they don't stumble too much over themselves. Shadow would enjoy a nice rivalry fight with Sonic. Tails being a tutorial guy does fit more or less. People would have preferred him as Sonic's equal heroic sidekick, but at least him being on the supporting side doesn't contradict his character.
Ah, but then we get to Zavok.
Right. Even in his introduction game, his story role and his game role are at conflict. The story puts all of the effort in building up his conflict with Dr. Eggman. Dr. Eggman is who imprisoned him. Dr. Eggman is who betrayed him. Dr. Eggman is who humiliated him. Sonic's merely just a complication.
And yet the Zeti are treated like they're Eggman's henchmen. They continue Eggman's plan and still in position in Eggman's base. They're still focused on fighting Sonic, even though that was what Eggman wanted from them. Sonic shouldn't mean anything to them. If anything, they should see Sonic as a potential ally, even if to backstab eventually. They never confront Eggman. Their dynamic with Dr. Eggman is entirely sidestepped.
Right, as game components, their betrayal never changes their dynamic in the gameplay. They're Koopa Kids with or without Eggman. And while Lost Worlds kinda gets away with it because their relationship with Eggman isn't necessarily contradicted, just completely ignored. But from that point on, Sega constantly uses the Zeti as generic henchmen under Eggman. Sonic Forces entirely sidesteps their relation together using the "it's just an illusion, get out of jail free" card. And I suppose the mobile phone games don't really have any logic to them other than give money to buy stuff. So it doesn't really matter, but yeah, it paints a picture where Sega desperately wants Zavok and Zeti to be like the Koopa Kids, just generic, meaningless boss characters to shove into whatever game so Sonic has someone to fight. But thematically, Dr. Eggman is the Zeti's true enemy and not Sonic. Sure, I can buy the Zeti having a bit of a beef with Sonic for beating them, but thematically, it's more satisfying to see them go after Eggman because that's the one who got them all enslaved and humiliated. That's their arch enemy. Sonic's just another complication. This is what their introduction game took pain to establish with them. And even now, there's still no payoff to any of that. Sega just treats them as generic sub-bosses to Eggman, which is not only a waste of them, but goes completely against their very nature. It makes sense if you look at them purely as soulless machinery parts for video game to game, but it is infuriatingly damaging to them as actual characters. And now, Zavok is Eggman's best buddy once again in Team Sonic Racing.
Now, we don't know what the story of Team Sonic Racing is yet, but agreed, Zavok seems like a stupid choice. Infinite would have made more sense. Or Orbot and Cubot.
I so expected Tails though to make an appearance, since the game seems to be gearing up to be another meta internet meme parade. But whatever, he's classic only I guess, even though he already cameoed in filthy, evil, impure Sonic Adventure. But whatever. We got Zavok as Eggman's henchman in Team Sonic Racing, and to be honest, I'm kind of fascinated at what they're gonna do with him in this story.
Story? Poor Roger. It's a racing game. You're not expecting a good story from a racing game, right?
Sonic Riders and Zero Gravity did have one.
That's adventure-era Sonic when Sonic Team still cared about their characters. This is modern Sonic.
Oh, don't get me wrong, I'm not expecting a good story. But this is just like with LEGO Dimensions. It's more that this is a nice opportunity to get a good look at Sega's usage of the character. The main games are big bloated monstrosities of uncooked new ideas, recycled old ideas, retcons and reboots, and the development team stumbling over themselves to tie all those broken pieces together into one semi-coherent Frankenstein monster. But clean games like LEGO Dimensions or Team Sonic Racing gives us a much more clean look at what exactly those characters still mean and what position they still hold, because they can now focus entirely on them. Although, to be fair, the LEGO Dimensions, that game did have one of the better storylines Sonic had in a decade. Too bad they're too self-aware all the time, but that's LEGO Dimensions for you. Anyway, look, Team Sonic Racing, it's all about teamwork, right? Even if you're the fastest racer and win the competition, if your teammates suck, they'll drag you down. Now, what's a more perfect game than this to have Zavok and Eggman together that have this dynamic where they hate each other but both have control over the others through the conk or manipulation or how the competition works. They're all bitterly working together, trying to backstab each other.
Right. Oh, and that reminds me. In Team Sonic Racing, I heard the teams you're in can be mixed up with custom-picked characters. So it's even possible Zavok might leave Eggman's team and join a different team for story reasons. Could be fun if Zavok's going around manipulating other teams to distrust each other.
Right, so if there's a writer who gives a shit, the ingredients to have a little fun with the characters and play around with all the character dynamics is right there. The ball is right in front of the goal, just give it a tiny little tap and we have a winner.
Still, it's a racing spin-off. We really shouldn't be expecting much.
Look, if this game is like Sonic Free Riders, where the story has no cutscenes or any big events, it's just endless talking head scenes, or if the cast is yapping, having Zavok and Eggman going around screwing with everyone's minds is a great way to have at least something interesting going on while everyone just sits talking around. And it fits perfectly with the whole team racing concept of the game. It's about teamwork. What better antagonist than someone who's getting the teams to fall apart, right? Again, all the ingredients are right there. It just makes too much sense not to do it.
Which means it won't happen.
Yeah, probably.
Look at Zavok's official character description. Zavok, Heavy, the leader of the Deadly Six, a demon-like being that continues to battle Sonic and friends whenever the opportunity arises. No mention of his beef with Eggman or his manipulation skills. He's just another one-dimensional monster man who hates Sonic villain. I'm sure the game will add a fourth wall breaking joke or two about how he betrayed Eggman once, because that's self-aware, and being self-aware is smart and funny and stuff. Of course, they don't do anything with this interesting factoid. It won't guide the characters or create any kind of dynamic or story complications. They'll just bring it up in a lazy joke, and then we're supposed to clap in our hands and go, "Oh wow, they remember! How clever and well written!" Looking forward to Team Sonic Racing, Roger?
Hey, look, remember Seaside Hill?
Oh boy, I'm so excited that after nearly a decade of level recycling, we finally get to the more obscure and rarely seen levels, like Seaside Hill.
I am still looking forward to Team Sonic Racing. I'm looking forward to seeing Silver and Blaze interact with each other, since this is the first time since, what, their introduction game? Gameplay's probably okay. Music's pretty awesome. Yep. Yeah. Happy 2019, folks. See you soon.